Have you ever had someone disrespect you so deeply that the entire room goes quiet? Not just insult you, but humiliate you with such precision that you can feel everyone's eyes burning into you, waiting to see if you'll break? That's exactly what happened to Simone Washington-Pierce at an exclusive Atlanta charity gala. Her husband's mistress, 5 months pregnant, wearing a dress that showed off every curve of that belly, walked right up to her and announced loud enough for the entire room to hear, "Some women are just built to give men what they really need. Real families. Not just empty promises with no children." Marcus laughed. His business partners joined in. 200 witnesses watched Simone's public humiliation. Everyone waited for Simone to crumble, to cry, to run. But what they didn't know was that Simone hadn't come to that gala as a victim. She'd come as a lawyer with receipts, evidence, and a plan that would change everything in the next minute. Before we continue, kindly go ahead and do me a quick favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the story. Simone Washington-Pierce wasn't just Marcus Pierce's wife. She was one of Atlanta's most respected corporate attorneys, specializing in intellectual property law. The kind of lawyer Fortune 500 companies called when millions of dollars hung in the balance. She'd spent 15 years building a reputation for being brilliant, thorough, and absolutely relentless in protecting her clients' interests. She'd negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions. She'd defended patents that changed entire industries. She'd held corporations accountable in boardrooms from Atlanta to Silicon Valley. And she was damn good at what she did. She met Marcus Pierce when she was 30 and he was 33, a rising tech entrepreneur with an AI software startup that was starting to get serious investor attention. He was ambitious, confident, charming in that way that successful men who know their worth tend to be. He built sleek algorithms and predictive models that made businesses more efficient. She found it sexy how passionate he was about his work, how he could talk for hours about machine learning and data architecture like he was describing art. They got married after 3 years of dating, and for a while, they were that couple. The power couple. The ones featured in Ebony magazine's Couples Who Are Winning issue. The ones invited to every gala, every exclusive fundraiser, every VIP event in Atlanta's black business community. People looked at Marcus and Simone and thought, they've got it all figured out. Marcus built his company from a 2-person operation in a shared office space to a 50-employee firm with clients across 3 continents. And Simone was right there beside him, not just as his wife, but as his legal architect. She protected his patents. She structured his contracts. She negotiated the licensing deals that turned his innovative software into real revenue. When investors came sniffing around, she made sure Marcus kept control of his intellectual property. When competitors tried to copy his code, she buried them in cease and desist letters that had teeth. They were partners. Equals. Building an empire together. Then they decided to start a family. Simone was 32 when they started trying. Month after month. Nothing. At first, it was just disappointing. Then it became concerning. Then it became consuming. Doctor's appointments that left them with more questions than answers. Fertility specialists who spoke in statistics and probabilities. IVF treatments that cost more than luxury cars and hurt like hell, physically and emotionally. 6 years. 6 long, painful years of negative pregnancy tests, failed implantations, and mounting medical bills that even their combined 6-figure incomes struggled to cover. 6 years of watching friends and colleagues have babies, first babies, second babies, even third babies, while Simone's body refused to cooperate. And with each failure, Marcus changed. He stopped touching her the way he used to. Stopped looking at her with desire and started looking at her with something else, something that felt like resentment. Like blame. Like her body had betrayed not just her, but him. The man who used to call her brilliant and beautiful started making comments about biological compatibility, and maybe this isn't meant to be. He never said it directly, but Simone knew what he meant. He thought it was her fault. He thought she was broken. Late nights at the office became more frequent. Business trips that seemed unnecessary started piling up. He stopped asking about her day. Stopped caring about her cases. The emotional distance became a canyon, and Simone found herself standing on one side, watching the man she loved disappear into someone she didn't recognize. Then came the credit card statements. Jewelry purchases she never received. Hotel rooms charged in their own city. Why would he need a hotel in Atlanta when they had a beautiful home in Buckhead? Simone's attorney instincts kicked in. She hired a private investigator, and within 2 weeks, she had her answer. Vanessa Cho, 28 years old. Blonde highlights. Worked in Marcus's marketing department. Instagram full of motivational quotes, green smoothies, and carefully filtered photos from places Simone recognized, restaurants she'd recommended, vacation spots she'd suggested. They'd been together for 8 months. And Vanessa was 4 months pregnant. That's when the real betrayal hit. Not just that Marcus had cheated. Not even that he'd gotten another woman pregnant. But that for 12 years, he'd let Simone believe the fertility problem was hers. He'd held her hand through invasive procedures. He'd sat in waiting rooms while doctors pumped her full of hormones that wrecked her body. He'd watched her cry herself to sleep, believing she was failing him, believing her body was defective. And the entire time, Marcus had a secret that made all of it a lie. But Simone didn't fall apart. She couldn't. She had clients depending on her. Cases that required her absolute focus. And more importantly, she had something that Marcus had clearly forgotten about. She was a lawyer who specialized in protecting intellectual property and structuring complex deals. And she was about to use every single one of those skills. She spent 3 weeks building her case the same way she'd build a case for any client, methodically, thoroughly, with documentation for everything. She hired the best private investigator in Atlanta. She subpoenaed medical records she had legal right to access as his spouse. She traced financial transactions. She reviewed patent filings and corporate documents. She identified every asset acquired during their marriage and calculated her legal entitlement down to the dollar. And then she waited for the perfect moment. The Atlanta Business Leadership Gala. The most prestigious event of the year. The place where Atlanta's elite gathered to see and be seen, where reputations were made and destroyed, where everyone who mattered would be watching. That's where Simone would make her move. But first, let's go back to what Simone discovered in those 3 weeks. The medical records that would change everything, the secret Marcus had been hiding since before they even met, and the truth that would detonate his entire world in front of 200 witnesses. 13 years ago, Simone Washington walked into the National Tech Innovation Conference in San Francisco wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost half a month's salary and carrying a leather portfolio that held contracts for 3 different startups. She was 29, 2 years away from making partner at Caldwell & Ross, one of Atlanta's most prestigious corporate law firms, and she was hungry. Not for money, though the partnership would bring plenty of that, but for the kind of cases that challenged her, that required her to think 10 steps ahead, that let her build something that mattered. She wasn't looking for a relationship. She dated plenty, lawyers, doctors, a professor at Emory who wrote poems that were beautiful but ultimately forgettable. None of them understood the fire in her belly, the need to prove herself in rooms where she was often the only black woman, the only woman, period. Work was her priority. Everything else could wait. Then she met Marcus Pierce. He was in the presenter's lounge, pacing like a caged panther, running through his pitch deck on his laptop. 32 years old, dressed in dark jeans and a blazer that somehow looked both casual and professional, with an intensity that made the air around him crackle. He was about to present his AI software platform to a room full of venture capitalists, and from the way he was muttering to himself, he was nervous as hell. "You're going to wear a hole in that carpet," Simone said, settling into a chair near the window. Marcus looked up, startled, then smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made something flutter in Simone's chest that she immediately tried to ignore. "That obvious?" he asked. "Only to someone who's watched about 50 nervous presenters today," she replied, pulling out her own laptop. "What are you pitching?" "Predictive analytics software for supply chain optimization. Basically, I've built an algorithm that can forecast inventory needs with 94% accuracy, which could save companies millions in waste and storage costs." Simone raised an eyebrow. "That's actually impressive. Have you protected the IP?" "Filed for a patent, but honestly, the legal side gives me nightmares. I'm good with code, terrible with contracts." "Well," Simone said, pulling out her business card, "I'm good with contracts and terrible with code." Simone Washington, intellectual property attorney. Marcus took the card, looked at it, then looked at her with new appreciation. "Marcus Pierce. And I think I might need to buy you coffee after this presentation." Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner at a hole-in-the-wall Thai place near the conference center turned into a walk through downtown San Francisco that lasted until 2 in the morning. They talked about everything: his vision for democratizing AI technology, her strategy for breaking through the glass ceiling at her firm, their shared experience of being underestimated and using it as fuel. "You know what nobody tells you about being the only black founder in these pitch meetings?" Marcus said as they stood on a bridge overlooking the bay. "They expect you to fail. They're almost waiting for it. So when you succeed, you don't just win, you shatter their entire framework." Simone understood that in her bones. Same in corporate law. They expect you to be the diversity hire, the quota. So you have to be twice as prepared, twice as sharp. You can't just be good, you have to be undeniable. Marcus looked at her, then with something that made her breath catch. "I think you might be the most fascinating person I've ever met." He flew to Atlanta 2 weeks later. Then again 3 weeks after that. Simone flew to meet him in Chicago, where he was pitching to investors, in Austin, where he was recruiting engineers. Their relationship built itself in airports and hotel lobbies and late-night phone calls where they talked about code and contracts and dreams that felt too big to say out loud but perfect to share with each other. Their first official date in Atlanta was on the rooftop of the Ventanas building, a restaurant with a view of the entire city skyline. Marcus wore a suit that Simone suspected he'd bought specifically for the occasion. She wore a red dress that made him forget his carefully planned conversation topics. "I'm building something real," Marcus told her over wine, "that cost more than his monthly rent. Something that's going to change how businesses operate. But I need someone who gets it. Who understands that this isn't just about making money, it's about proving what's possible." "Then build it right," Simone said, leaning forward. "Protect your intellectual property. Structure your company so investors can't steal your vision. Let me help you." That's when Marcus knew he was in love with her, not just for her brilliance, but for the way she saw his dreams, and immediately started building the legal scaffolding to make them real. They got married 18 months later in a ceremony that made the society pages of both the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Essence magazine. Elegant, sophisticated, held at the Atlanta History Center with 200 guests who represented the intersection of old money, new money, and earned respect. Simone wore a custom gown that her mother cried over. Marcus couldn't stop smiling the entire day. "You know this means you're stuck with me, right?" he whispered during their first dance. "Can't divorce a woman who knows all your business secrets." Simone laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Good thing I'm planning to keep you around." The early years were everything they'd promised each other. Marcus's company, Pierce Analytics, grew from a 3-person operation running out of a WeWork space to a legitimate firm with 20 employees, real office space, and clients that included 2 Fortune 500 companies. And Simone wasn't just his wife. She was his legal architect, his strategic partner, the person who turned his innovative ideas into protected, profitable reality. Late nights in their home office became their routine. Marcus would work on code while Simone drafted patent applications, reviewing every line of his algorithms to identify what was truly novel, what could be protected, what would stand up to scrutiny from competitors and patent examiners. "This predictive model for inventory optimization," Simone said one night, 3 years into their marriage, highlighting sections of code on her screen. "This is the crown jewel. We need to file for protection in the US, EU, and China. If this works the way you think it will, every major retailer is going to want it." She was right. Within 2 years, Pierce Analytics had licensing deals with companies in 7 countries. Marcus hired more engineers, more salespeople. The company expanded into a real office building with a lobby and everything. And behind every contract, every partnership agreement, every licensing deal was Simone's legal work, meticulous, airtight, designed to protect Marcus's interests and ensure he maintained control of his creation. When the acquisition offer came, a tech giant willing to pay $47 million for Pierce Analytics. It was Simone who negotiated the terms. She spent 6 weeks in conference rooms, going line by line through 300 pages of contracts, making sure Marcus got fair value not just for the company but for the patents, the client list, the future potential of the technology. "You just made me a millionaire," Marcus said the night the deal closed, champagne in hand, standing in their living room at 2 in the morning. "We just made us millionaires," Simone corrected, kissing him. "60% of those patents have my name on them. That company exists because we built it together." Ebony magazine featured them 6 months later, Atlanta's power couple, how Marcus and Simone Pierce built a tech empire together. The photo showed them in their Buckhead home, the one they just bought, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city, the one that announced they'd arrived. Marcus in a tailored suit, Simone in an elegant dress, both of them looking at each other like they'd found the perfect partner. The article quoted Marcus saying, "Simone isn't just my wife, she's the reason any of this exists. You can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't protect it legally, you have nothing. She gave me the foundation to build something that lasts." But even then, even in those golden years when everything seemed perfect, there were small moments that Simone would later remember differently. "So when do you think we'll start on the next project?" a journalist asked during the Ebony interview. "Next project?" Marcus had responded. "Kids," the journalist said, smiling. The article wouldn't be complete without asking about the future of the Pierce family. Marcus had laughed, squeezed Simone's hand, and said, "Eventually. We're focused on building the business empire first. Kids can wait until we're really ready." Eventually. When we're ready. Simone had smiled for the camera, agreed that timing mattered, said all the right things about wanting to establish their careers first. But even then, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she didn't want to acknowledge. Why does he keep saying eventually? Why not soon or definitely? Why does it always feel like he's postponing something he's supposed to want? She ignored that voice. They were happy. They were successful. They had time. She didn't know then what Marcus had made sure she'd never know, that eventually was a lie, that when we're ready was a deflection, that the future she imagined was something he'd surgically removed from possibility years before they'd even met. But she would find out. And when she did, every single one of these golden memories would be reframed, recontextualized, transformed from a love story into evidence of a betrayal that had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. Simone was 32 when she and Marcus decided it was time. They'd been married for 4 years, the business was thriving, they'd just moved into the Buckhead house with the extra bedrooms that seemed to be waiting for the patter of small feet. It felt like the natural next step, the final piece of the perfect life they'd built together. "Let's start trying," Marcus said one Sunday morning over coffee and the New York Times, saying it so casually, like he was suggesting they try that new restaurant in Midtown. Simone had smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. "Okay. Let's do it." She thought it would be easy. She was healthy, active, still young enough that her doctor had said there shouldn't be any issues. Marcus was in great shape for 35. They had good genetics, good health insurance, good everything. How hard could it be? Month 1, nothing. Not a big deal. Everyone knows it doesn't always happen immediately. Month 6, starting to wonder. Simone bought ovulation predictor kits, tracked her cycle with scientific precision, read articles about optimal timing and positions and supplements that might help. Month 12, the concern that had been a whisper became a voice she couldn't ignore. Their first fertility specialist appointment was on a Tuesday afternoon in a sleek medical office with soft lighting designed to make devastating news feel gentler. Dr. Patricia Chun was kind, professional, and thorough in a way that somehow made the invasive questions feel almost normal. "How long have you been trying? Any history of sexually transmitted infections? Previous pregnancies or terminations? Family history of fertility issues?" Simone answered everything honestly, sitting in the paper gown that crinkled every time she moved, feeling exposed in ways that had nothing to do with the physical examination. Marcus held her hand through the transvaginal ultrasound, the blood draws, the uncomfortable probing that made her feel like her body was being interrogated for crimes it didn't commit. Everything looks normal, Dr. Chen said, reviewing the results 2 weeks later. Your ovarian reserve is good. Fallopian tubes are clear. Hormone levels are within normal range. So what's wrong? Simone asked. Sometimes there's no clear explanation. We call it unexplained infertility. It's frustrating, I know, but it doesn't mean we're out of options. Unexplained. Like her body was a mystery even science couldn't solve. Like she was failing a test she couldn't study for. Marcus squeezed her hand. We'll figure this out, he said, and she believed him because he'd never let her down before. IVF. In vitro fertilization. The words sounded so clinical, so cold, but they represented hope, expensive, painful hope, but hope nonetheless. The hormone injections started on day 3 of her cycle. Simone learned to inject herself in the stomach, the medication burning under her skin, leaving bruises that bloomed purple and yellow across her abdomen like violent flowers. She set alarms on her phone so she wouldn't miss a dose. She kept the medications in a special bag in the refrigerator, organized by date and time, because if she was going to do this, she was going to do it perfectly. The side effects were brutal. Her body swelled with water retention. Her mood swung from hopeful to devastated sometimes within the same hour. She gained 15 pounds despite eating carefully. Her breasts hurt so much she couldn't sleep on her stomach. She cried at commercials, at songs on the radio, at nothing at all. And everywhere, were pregnant women. In the grocery store, at the gym, walking through her office building. Facebook became a minefield of pregnancy announcements, gender reveals, first ultrasound photos. Each one felt like a personal attack, a reminder that her body was refusing to do what seemed to come so easily to everyone else. You okay? Marcus would ask when he found her crying in the bathroom after another negative test. Fine, she'd lie, because admitting how broken she felt seemed like giving up, and Simone Washington-Pierce didn't give up on anything. Year 3 brought a shift so subtle that Simone almost didn't notice it at first. Marcus's support, which had seemed so solid, started to feel conditional. Performative. Maybe you're too stressed, he said after another failed cycle. All that time at the office, the pressure of those big cases. Your body knows when you're overwhelmed. Dr. Chun had said something similar, but hearing it from Marcus felt different. Felt like blame wrapped in concern. I need to work, Simone said, defensive. We both do. I'm just saying maybe you need to slow down. Other women manage to get pregnant while working. Maybe you're just too focused on your career. Other women. Like she was failing at something that should come naturally, that shouldn't require this much effort or pain or medical intervention. She was 35 now, advanced maternal age according to the medical charts, a phrase that made her feel ancient despite still being in her professional prime. Doctors started attributing the failures to her age, her stress levels, her body's declining fertility. Never Marcus. Always her. And she believed them. She internalized every failure, every negative pregnancy test, every cycle that ended with her period arriving like a monthly reminder of her inadequacy. She cried alone in bathrooms at work, in the shower where Marcus couldn't hear, in her car before walking into the office with a smile that felt like armor. I'm sorry, she whispered to Marcus after the 3rd failed IVF attempt, as if she'd personally disappointed him, as if her body's refusal was a choice she was making. It's okay, he said, but his voice was flat, distant, and he didn't reach for her the way he used to. Year 4, Marcus stopped coming to appointments. You handle the medical stuff, he said, not meeting her eyes. Just let me know what they say. I've got this investor meeting I can't miss. Simone sat alone in Dr. Chen's office, listening to options and statistics and success rates that seemed to shrink with each passing month. She signed consent forms by herself. She made decisions about medications and procedures by herself. She drove herself home after egg retrievals, groggy from anesthesia, wondering when exactly her husband had stopped being her partner in this fight. Year 5, the distance became a chasm. Marcus worked later, traveled more. Big client in Seattle, he'd say. Meetings in Austin. Conference in Miami. Each trip stretched longer, his phone calls home shorter and less frequent. Their conversations, when they happened, felt scripted. Surface-level updates about work, about the house, about everything except the thing that was tearing them apart. Physical intimacy decreased from occasional to rare to almost non-existent. Sex had become so clinical, so tied to ovulation schedules and optimal timing, that it had lost any sense of connection or pleasure. Simone threw herself into work to cope. She took on bigger cases, more complex negotiations, anything to fill the hours and quiet the voice in her head that said she was failing at the one thing that mattered. She made senior partner at Caldwell and Ross. She won a landmark patent case that made legal journals. She was professionally brilliant and personally breaking. Year 6. One last IVF cycle. Their 6th attempt. The last one their insurance would cover, the last one Simone's body could handle, the last thread of hope they had left. She went through the motions like a soldier in a war she was losing, the injections, the monitoring appointments, the egg retrieval, the agonizing 2-week wait. She didn't let herself hope this time. Hope hurt too much. When Dr. Chun called with the results, Simone already knew from the tone of her voice. "I'm so sorry, Simone. The test is negative." She hung up the phone and sat in her office, staring at the Atlanta skyline through her window, feeling nothing. She'd cried so many tears over the past 6 years that she had none left. She was empty. Hollowed out. She called Marcus. He was in a meeting but called back 2 hours later. "It didn't work," she said simply. Silence on the other end. Then, "Maybe it's time to accept reality." Not "I'm sorry." Not "we'll figure something out." Not "I love you regardless." Accept reality. Reality was that her body was broken. Reality was that she'd failed at the most basic biological function. Reality was that she wasn't woman enough to give her husband what he wanted. Reality was that she'd spent 6 years and over $100,000 and countless tears trying to force something that clearly wasn't meant to be. That night, Simone sat alone in the bathroom of their beautiful Buckhead home, the one with the extra bedrooms they'd never fill, and looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Exhausted. Defeated. Convinced that her value as a wife, as a woman, had been determined by a series of negative pregnancy tests. She didn't know then that Marcus had engineered every single failure. That her body wasn't broken. It had simply been fighting a battle it could never win. That the man she trusted with her deepest pain had been lying to her face for 6 years, watching her suffer through medical torture that was completely unnecessary. She didn't know that yet. But she would. And when she did, the woman who felt broken in that bathroom would become someone entirely different. Someone who didn't cry. Someone who collected evidence. Someone who waited for exactly the right moment to detonate the truth in the most public, devastating way possible. But tonight, she was just Simone. 38 years old. Childless. Believing with every fiber of her being that she had failed. And Marcus let her believe it. Their 10th anniversary arrived on a Thursday in April, the kind of perfect spring day that made Atlanta feel like the best city in the world. Simone had made reservations at Bacchanalia 3 months in advance, their special place, where Marcus had proposed, where they'd celebrated every major milestone. She'd bought a new dress, slate gray silk that draped elegantly. She'd even allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope that maybe this dinner could be a reset, a reminder of who they used to be before fertility treatments and distance had poisoned everything. Marcus didn't show up. At 7:30, Simone sat alone at their table, watching other couples celebrate anniversaries and birthdays and promotions, checking her phone every 2 minutes. The waiter refilled her water glass with pitying eyes. By 8:15, she'd called Marcus 4 times. No answer. She drove to his office building in Midtown, her anniversary heels clicking against the marble lobby floor. The security guard recognized her, waved her through to the elevators. The 20th floor was mostly dark except for the corner office, Marcus's office, light spilling from the doorway. Simone pushed the door open. Marcus was there, leaning against his desk, laughing at something on his laptop. And standing entirely too close to him was a woman Simone didn't recognize. Blonde, petite, wearing a fitted dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She had her hand on Marcus's arm, casual and familiar in a way that made Simone's stomach drop. "Simone," Marcus said, straightening quickly, surprise flashing across his face before smoothing into something that looked rehearsed. "I didn't expect." "Our anniversary dinner," Simone said, her voice tight. 7:30 reservation. Bacchanalia. Ring any bells? Marcus's face went blank. He'd genuinely forgotten. 10 years of marriage, and their anniversary hadn't even registered. The blonde woman stepped back, suddenly very interested in her phone. "I should go. We can finish the marketing campaign tomorrow, Marcus." "Vanessa, wait," Marcus started, but she was already gathering her bag, sliding past Simone with a perfume cloud that smelled expensive and deliberately seductive. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Pierce," Vanessa said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Simone watched her leave, then turned back to Marcus. "Marketing campaign? On our anniversary? At 8:30 at night. It's a big campaign. Launch is next week. I lost track of time." "You forgot." "I've been busy, Simone. The company doesn't run itself. The company she'd helped him build. The company that wouldn't exist without her legal work. But apparently that bought her nothing. Not his time, not his memory, not even the basic courtesy of remembering the day they'd promised to be partners for life. After that night, something shifted in how Marcus spoke to her. The mask of supportive husband slipped, revealing something uglier underneath. "You know what the problem is," he said one Sunday morning, unprompted, looking up from his iPad. "Career women like you lose touch with what really matters. You're so focused on being successful that you forget how to be feminine. How to be soft. How to be what a man actually needs." Simone looked up from the legal brief she was reviewing. "Excuse me. I'm just saying, maybe there's a reason things didn't work out. Mother material is different from lawyer material. Some women are built for boardrooms, some for nurseries. You can't be both." The words landed like punches. Simone had spent 6 years believing her body was the problem, but now Marcus was saying her entire identity was wrong. That her ambition, her intelligence, her success, everything she'd worked for, had somehow made her less of a woman. "Black professional women," he continued, warming to his subject like he'd been thinking about this for a while, "sometimes you lose that softness. That nurturing quality. You become so focused on proving yourselves that you forget men need something different at home." Simone stared at her husband, this man who'd once told her that her brilliance was what made him fall in love with her, and wondered when exactly he'd started resenting the very qualities he'd claimed to admire. The credit card statement arrived in early November. Simone handled their finances, another task Marcus had delegated to her, so she saw every charge. And that month, several charges stood out. Tiffany & Company, $3,200. She hadn't received any jewelry. The St. Regis Atlanta, $680. They lived in Atlanta. Why would Marcus need a hotel room? The Southern Gentleman, $450. An upscale restaurant she'd been wanting to try, but they'd never gone together. Another hotel charge. Another restaurant. More jewelry. A pattern emerging like a photograph developing in a darkroom, the image becoming clearer and more damning with each detail. Simone started paying attention. She noticed perfume on Marcus's collar, something floral and sweet, nothing like the subtle scents she wore. She saw late-night text messages that made him smile in ways he hadn't smiled at her in years. She watched him shower and change clothes before going to the office on a Saturday afternoon. One night, while Marcus was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Simone glanced at the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you already." The message was from a contact saved simply as V. Simone's hands shook as she put the phone back exactly where it had been. She sat on the edge of their bed, the bed they'd shared for 10 years, the bed they'd made love in back when they still loved each other, and felt something inside her crystallize from hurt into something harder. Something colder. The law firm of Caldwell and Ross had connections to the best private investigators in Atlanta. Simone called one on a Tuesday morning, meeting him at a coffee shop far from her office, far from anywhere she might be recognized. Richard Chun was in his 50s, former police detective, now ran his own investigation firm. He had kind eyes that had probably seen every variation of human betrayal. "What do you need to know?" he asked after Simone had explained the situation, hating how her voice cracked on certain words, hating that she was that cliché, the suspicious wife hiring a PI. "Everything," she said. "Who she is. How long it's been going on. And I need photographs. Documentation. Everything that would hold up in court." "You're an attorney," Richard observed. "You know what you're asking for." "I know exactly what I'm asking for." Week 1, Richard sent photos. Marcus and a blonde woman at a restaurant in Buckhead. Another photo at a wine bar in Virginia Highland. The woman was young, pretty in a way that felt deliberately curated. Blown-out hair, perfect makeup, clothes that showed off a slim figure. Week 2, more photos. The woman entering Marcus's penthouse, the one he kept downtown for late work nights. She stayed for 6 hours. Then overnight. Then Marcus left her apartment in the morning, wearing the same clothes from the night before. Week 3, Richard called instead of texting. "You need to come to my office," he said. "There's something you need to see." Simone drove there with her heart pounding, knowing that whatever Richard had found was going to change everything. He showed her the photos first. Recent ones, taken outside a medical building. The blonde woman walking out, and even in the surveillance photo, it was obvious. The small swell of her stomach. The protective hand she kept resting there. The pregnancy glow that magazines always talked about. "Her name is Vanessa Cho," Richard said, sliding a dossier across his desk. 28 years old. Works in your husband's marketing department. They've been involved for approximately 8 months based on the timeline I've established. 8 months. Simone did the math quickly. And she's pregnant? 4 months along, according to her social media posts. Richard pulled up an Instagram account. There was Vanessa, photographed from flattering angles, with captions about unexpected blessings and new chapters and miracles. Simone stared at the photos, her mind racing. Marcus had gotten another woman pregnant. After 6 years of telling Simone it just wasn't happening for them, after watching her go through medical hell, after letting her believe her body was broken, he'd gotten his 28-year-old employee pregnant within months of starting an affair. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that Simone felt oddly calm. Past rage, past tears, into a cold clarity that felt almost like peace. "I need you to keep digging," she told Richard. "Everything about Vanessa Cho. Her background, her habits, her other relationships. Everything." Back in her office, Simone pulled up Vanessa's Instagram on her computer, studying every post with the analytical mind that made her an excellent attorney. The pregnancy announcement was there, carefully crafted with soft lighting and a hand on her belly. The comments were full of congratulations, but notably, nothing tagged Marcus. Nothing that publicly connected the baby to him. Strange, for a woman who seemed to post every other detail of her life. Simone kept scrolling, going back months. There, a photo from 7 months ago. Vanessa at a restaurant with a man who wasn't Marcus. Tall, athletic build, the caption read, "Best dinner with my favorite person." Another photo from 9 months ago, Vanessa and the same man at the beach. Couldn't ask for better company. The pieces weren't fitting together right. If Marcus had been sleeping with Vanessa for 8 months, and she was 4 months pregnant, the timeline worked. But something in Simone's gut, the same instinct that made her excellent at finding holes in opposing counsel's arguments, told her there was more to this story. Marcus couldn't get her pregnant in 6 years of trying. 6 years of fertility treatments, of perfectly timed intercourse, of medical intervention. And yet he'd knocked up Vanessa in a matter of months? Simone pulled up Marcus's medical history, the file she had legal access to as his spouse. She'd never looked before because there'd been no reason. All the doctors had focused on her body, her age, her eggs, her uterus. Marcus had given a sperm sample once, early on, and it had been labeled normal. Case closed. But now Simone wanted to dig deeper. "Richard," she said when he answered her call, "I need you to do something else for me. I need complete medical records for Marcus Pierce. Everything from the last 25 years. That's going to require a legal subpoena." "I'm a lawyer," Simone said. I know exactly what it requires. And I know exactly how to get it. 2 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived at her office via secure courier. Medical records, comprehensive, complete, dating back to Marcus's 20s. Simone spread them across her desk and started reading. Standard checkups. College sports physical. Treatment for a broken arm at age 25. Nothing unusual until... She stopped. Read the page again. Then one more time to make sure she wasn't imagining it. 1996. Marcus Pierce, age 28. Procedure, vasectomy. Postoperative notes, successful bilateral tubal ligation. Patient confirmed understanding of permanent nature of procedure. Follow-up sperm count, 0. Procedure confirmed effective. The paper trembled in Simone's hands. A vasectomy. 24 years ago. Years before they'd even met. Permanent. Irreversible. Every doctor's appointment. Every hormone injection. Every invasive procedure. Every month of hope and crushing disappointment. Every moment she'd felt broken, inadequate, less than a woman. All of it based on a lie. Marcus had known, from the very first month they'd started trying, that pregnancy was impossible. He'd sat in fertility clinics holding her hand. He'd watched doctors blame her age, her stress, her body. He'd let her pump herself full of hormones that made her sick and sad. He'd let her believe she was failing him. And he'd known the entire time. Simone sat in her office as the sun set over Atlanta, the city lights flickering on one by one, and felt something inside her transform. The hurt woman who'd cried in bathrooms disappeared. In her place was the lawyer who'd built a career on being ruthless, strategic, and absolutely unforgiving. She picked up her phone and called Richard. "I need you to expand surveillance on Vanessa Cho," she said, her voice steady and cold. "I want to know everywhere she goes and everyone she sees. Particularly any men she's spending time with besides Marcus." "You think?" "I think that if Marcus has been sterile for 24 years, that baby she's carrying isn't his. And I want proof before I blow up his entire world." The investigation continued. And 3 days later, Richard delivered exactly what Simone needed. Photos of Vanessa entering an apartment building in Buckhead. Not Marcus's building. Someone else's. She stayed for hours. Overnight. Multiple nights when Marcus was traveling for business. The apartment belonged to Tyler Morrison. Age 29. Personal trainer at an upscale gym. And according to his Instagram, very good friends with Vanessa Cho. Very good friends who had dinner together, worked out together, spent weekends together. Very good friends who, based on the timeline, had been together right around the time Vanessa would have conceived. Simone smiled for the first time in weeks. Not a happy smile. A predator's smile. Vanessa had seen a wealthy older man desperate for a child and had tried to trap him with a pregnancy that wasn't his. She'd miscalculated on one crucial detail. She didn't know about the vasectomy. She'd assumed Marcus was fertile, that the problem had been Simone, and she tried to give him what his wife supposedly couldn't. The con would have worked beautifully if Marcus hadn't already made pregnancy biologically impossible decades ago. Simone began to plan. She filed preliminary divorce paperwork. She documented every patent with her name on it. 60% of Marcus's intellectual property had her fingerprints all over it. She reviewed Georgia's equitable distribution laws. She calculated asset division. She prepared her case the way she'd prepared hundreds of cases before, with meticulous attention to detail and an absolute refusal to lose. And then, an invitation arrived in the mail. The Atlanta Business Leadership Gala. Black tie. Honoring this year's most influential entrepreneurs and business leaders. Marcus would be there. He was being honored, in fact, for his contributions to Atlanta's tech sector. Simone made a phone call. "Richard, I need to know if Vanessa Cho will be attending the Atlanta Business Leadership Gala." "Give me an hour." 40 minutes later, she's on the guest list. Listed as Marcus Pierce's +1. Of course she was. Marcus was going to parade his pregnant mistress in front of Atlanta's elite. He was going to humiliate Simone publicly, let everyone see that he'd moved on, that he'd found someone who could give him what his wife couldn't. Simone hung up the phone and smiled that cold, dangerous smile again. "Perfect," she said to her empty office. She had 3 weeks until the gala. 3 weeks to finalize her divorce filing, to organize her evidence, to prepare for the most important performance of her life. Marcus wanted public? She'd give him public. He wanted humiliation? She'd show him what real humiliation looked like. He thought he was going to destroy her in front of 200 witnesses? She was going to detonate his entire existence with receipts, medical records, and the truth he'd been hiding for 24 years. 3 weeks. Then the reckoning. Simone sat in her corner office at Caldwell & Ross on a Wednesday afternoon, the Atlanta skyline stretching before her like a kingdom she'd helped build. The manila envelope from the medical records department lay on her mahogany desk, innocuous and devastating all at once. She'd read the vasectomy documentation 7 times now. Each time, the words stayed the same, but their meaning expanded, revealing new layers of betrayal she hadn't fully processed yet. Patient confirmed understanding of permanent nature of procedure. Marcus had chosen this. At 28 years old, he'd walked into a doctor's office and made a deliberate decision to never have biological children. Not couldn't have children, chose not to. And then years later, he'd met Simone and pretended that fatherhood was something he wanted, something they'd build together, something they were struggling toward as a team. Every single moment of those 6 years had been theater. Performance art designed to make her believe she was the broken one. Simone's hands shook as she poured herself a glass of bourbon from the crystal decanter she kept in her office cabinet. It was 2 in the afternoon, but some revelations required alcohol. She thought about the first fertility specialist appointment. Dr. Chun asking Marcus if he'd ever had any relevant medical procedures. He'd said no. Lied directly to a doctor while holding Simone's hand, his face arranged in concerned husband configuration. She thought about the hormone injections. Twice daily for weeks at a time, the medication burning under her skin, leaving bruises across her abdomen. Lupron. Phelistim. Progesterone in oil that required needles so thick she had to ice the injection site first. Her body swelling, her moods crashing, her health insurance maxing out. All completely unnecessary. She thought about the egg retrievals. The anesthesia, the invasion of the procedure, waking up groggy and cramping while a nurse told her how many eggs they'd harvested. 15 the first time. 12 the second. 8 the third. Each retrieval costing thousands of dollars, each one physically traumatic, each one giving her hope that this time finally it would work. It was never going to work. She thought about the moment, God, she could still feel it, when Dr. Chun had gently suggested that maybe the problem was Simone's advanced maternal age. She'd been 35. Healthy, active, professionally successful. But the medical establishment had looked at her birth certificate and declared her eggs old, her fertility window closing, her body past its prime for the basic biological function she was designed for. And Marcus had sat there, nodding, agreeing, letting them blame her. The guilt she'd carried for 6 years, the shame, the inadequacy, the feeling that her body had failed her, all of it had been manufactured by a man who'd had a vasectomy before they'd even met. Simone set down her glass because her hands were shaking too hard. The rage was so pure, so absolute, that it felt almost clean. This wasn't the messy anger of a betrayed wife. This was the cold fury of someone who'd been systematically gaslit for years, whose pain had been weaponized, whose trust had been violated in the most intimate way possible. She called Richard Chun at 4 o'clock. "I need everything on Vanessa Cho," she said without preamble. "And I mean everything. Social media going back years. Financial records if you can get them. Every relationship, every connection. I want to know who she really is." "You found something," Richard said. It wasn't a question. "Marcus has been sterile since 1996. That baby she's carrying isn't his. It can't be. And I need to prove who the real father is before I go nuclear. I'm on it." Richard was worth every dollar of his substantial fee. Within 48 hours, Simone had a dossier on Vanessa Cho that read like a character study for a Lifetime movie villain. Vanessa Marie Cho. Born in Portland, Oregon. Moved to Atlanta 3 years ago. Bachelor's degree in communications from a state school. Worked her way through several marketing positions before landing at Pierce Analytics 18 months ago. Instagram follower count, 47,000, mostly from posting aspirational lifestyle content, green smoothies, yoga poses, motivational quotes about manifestation and abundance. But it was the relationship history that interested Simone most. Tyler Morrison appeared in Vanessa's social media 2 years ago. Personal trainer, entrepreneur, ran a boutique fitness studio in Buckhead. He appeared in dozens of Vanessa's posts, beach trips, hiking excursions, cozy dinner photos with captions like "grateful for this one and my person." Then, about 10 months ago, the Tyler posts became less frequent. The captions changed. More generic, less personal. Good workout today instead of best workout with my favorite human. The timeline aligned perfectly with when Vanessa had started working more closely with Marcus, when the affair had likely begun. But Tyler didn't disappear entirely. Richard's surveillance photos told a different story than Vanessa's curated Instagram. There, Vanessa entering Tyler's apartment building at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus was in Austin that week for a conference. Another photo, Vanessa and Tyler having breakfast at a cafe in Virginia Highland, her hand resting on his across the table. Another, Tyler's car parked outside Vanessa's apartment overnight. 3 different nights over 2 weeks. She's playing both of them, Simone said aloud, studying the photos spread across her desk. Marcus is the meal ticket. Tyler is, what? The actual relationship? The real father. She pulled up Vanessa's Instagram again, scrolling to the pregnancy announcement from 6 weeks ago. A carefully staged photo, Vanessa in soft lighting wearing a flowing white dress, hand on her barely there bump. The caption was all about unexpected blessings and new chapters, and miracles happen when you least expect them. But nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it mention Marcus. No tag, no name, no indication of who the father was. Strange, for a woman who posted every other detail of her life. Unless she wasn't sure herself. Or unless she knew, and it wasn't the rich tech entrepreneur she needed it to be. Simone made a list in her leather legal pad, the same way she'd outline a case strategy. Known facts. Marcus had vasectomy in 1996, documented, verified. Vanessa is 4 months pregnant, visible, confirmed via social media. Biological impossibility. Marcus cannot be the father. Vanessa maintains relationship with Tyler Morrison, documented via surveillance. Timeline suggests conception occurred while Vanessa was involved with both men. Vanessa has not publicly identified father, suspicious given her social media habits. Probable conclusions. Vanessa is attempting paternity fraud. Tyler Morrison is likely biological father. Vanessa targeted Marcus as wealthy, childless Mark. Vanessa did not know about vasectomy, assumption, Marcus never disclosed. Affair began as calculated move, not crime of passion. Legal strategy. File for divorce, grounds, adultery, fraud. Document all marital assets. Establish contribution to Marcus's IP, 60% of patents bear my name. Claim 50% of marital assets under Georgia equitable distribution law. Expose vasectomy publicly to establish fraud and emotional damages. Tactical considerations. Where and when to reveal information for maximum impact. How to protect own reputation while destroying his. How to ensure Vanessa's deception is also exposed. Media strategy. Control narrative before it controls you. Simone sat back, studying her notes. This wasn't just about divorce. This was about public vindication, about making sure everyone who'd pitted her for her infertility knew the truth. This was about destroying the man who'd let her believe she was broken while he'd broken his vows and her trust. This required precision. Timing. The perfect stage. She pulled up her calendar. The Atlanta Business Leadership Gala was in 2.5 weeks. Simone spent the next week working with a methodical intensity that had made her one of Atlanta's most feared litigators. She filed divorce papers on a Monday morning, having them served to Marcus's office at precisely 9 a.m. when she knew he'd be in his weekly executive meeting. She documented every patent she'd worked on for Pierce Analytics. The original AI algorithm. She'd written the legal framework that protected it. The predictive modeling software. She'd negotiated the licensing deals. The supply chain optimization platform. She'd structured the contracts that made it profitable. 60% of Marcus's intellectual property had her fingerprints all over it, and she had the documentation to prove it. She met with her own divorce attorney, Patricia Morrison, a woman with a reputation for leaving opposing counsel in tears. "This is comprehensive," Patricia said, reviewing Simone's documentation. "You've basically done my job for me." "I'm a corporate attorney," Simone said. "I know how to build an airtight case. The vasectomy is devastating. Fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, possible criminal charges depending on how we frame the fertility treatment deception. And the mistress isn't even carrying his child." Patricia smiled the way sharks smile at wounded seals. "We're going to destroy him, Simone." "I don't want to destroy him in a courtroom," Simone said quietly. "I want to destroy him publicly. I want everyone who watched me go through 6 years of hell to know it was all a lie." "The gala." "The gala," Simone confirmed. "He's bringing her as his date. He's going to parade his pregnant mistress in front of Atlanta's entire business community. He thinks he's humiliating me. But you'll be prepared. I'll have medical records on my phone. Divorce papers already filed. Evidence of Vanessa's relationship with Tyler Morrison. And I'll have the floor at an event where 200 influential people will witness every word." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "This is either brilliant or catastrophic. Possibly both." "I've spent 6 years being humiliated privately," Simone said. "He can spend one evening being destroyed publicly. Fair trade." Richard called on a Thursday with the final piece of evidence. "Tyler Morrison has hired a family law attorney," he said. "He's preparing to file for paternity rights." "He knows," Simone said. "He knows. And he wants to be in the kid's life. My source says Vanessa has been stringing him along, telling him she ended things with Marcus, that she's going to tell Marcus the truth after the baby is born. She's conning both of them. Quite successfully, until you." Simone felt a momentary flash of something almost like sympathy for Tyler Morrison. He was being used just like she'd been used, lied to just like she'd been lied to. Then the feeling passed. He'd slept with another man's girlfriend. He'd helped create this mess. They all deserved what was coming. "Can you get me documentation of Tyler's paternity filing?" Simone asked. "It's not filed yet. But I can get you his attorney's contact information. Maybe you two should talk." Tyler Morrison's attorney was a young woman named Jennifer Park who sounded exhausted when Simone called her. "My client wants to do right by his child," Jennifer said. "But Ms. Cho has been difficult. She keeps insisting the child is Marcus Pierce's, but the timeline doesn't support that claim based on when she and my client were intimate. What if I told you Marcus Pierce is biologically incapable of fathering children?" Simone said. "What if I told you he had a vasectomy 24 years ago?" Silence on the other end. "Then, you're his wife. Soon to be ex-wife. And I have medical documentation that proves what I'm saying. Ms. Park, I think we can help each other." They met for coffee the next day. Simone showed Jennifer the vasectomy records. Jennifer showed Simone text messages between Tyler and Vanessa that established their sexual relationship during the conception window. "The gala is next week," Simone said. "Marcus is bringing Vanessa. He's going to humiliate me by showing off his pregnant girlfriend. I'm going to expose both of them, the vasectomy, the affair, and the fact that the baby isn't his. And Tyler will be vindicated as the actual father. If he wants custody, paternity fraud by Vanessa works in his favor." Jennifer smiled slowly. "You're going to blow up their entire lives in front of Atlanta's elite." "Yes," Simone said simply. "Yes, I am." The official invitation to the Atlanta Business Leadership Gala arrived in heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of invitation that announced its own importance. You are cordially invited to honor this year's distinguished recipients. Marcus's name was on the list. Of course it was. He was being honored for his innovative contributions to Atlanta's technology sector and his leadership in building successful enterprises. The enterprises Simone had built with him. The innovations she'd protected legally. The success she'd made possible. And he was bringing Vanessa. Richard had confirmed it. She was listed as his +1, registered for the event, probably already planning what dress would best show off her pregnant belly. Simone opened her closet and pulled out a gown she'd been saving. Royal blue, elegant, sophisticated. The kind of dress that announced power and grace. She'd bought it months ago for an event she'd ended up missing due to a work emergency. Perfect for a coronation. Or an execution. She tried it on, studying herself in the full-length mirror. She looked good. Professional, powerful, dignified. Not like a woman who'd been broken. Like a woman who was about to break someone else. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the first direct communication since the divorce papers had been served. "We need to talk." Simone deleted it without responding. Another text, "You can't just file for divorce without discussing it." Delete. "Simone, be reasonable. We can work this out." She typed a response, "My attorney will be in touch." All communication goes through her. "This is ridiculous. I'm coming over. If you show up at my home, I'll call the police." "We're done, Marcus. You'll understand just how done at the gala." A long pause. Then, "What does that mean?" Simone smiled at her phone and didn't answer. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Let him spend the next week trying to figure out what she knew, what she'd planned, what was coming. He'd find out soon enough. 7 days until the Atlanta Business Leadership Gala. 7 days until Marcus Pierce's entire world collapsed in front of everyone who mattered. Simone hung the blue gown back in her closet, placed her phone on her dresser, and poured herself a glass of wine. She wasn't nervous. Wasn't scared. Wasn't even angry anymore. She was ready. She'd spent 6 years being the victim in Marcus's carefully constructed lie. Next week, she'd be the prosecutor, the judge, and the executioner. And she had receipts. All the receipts. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Atlanta glittered like something out of a fairy tale, the kind where the princess doesn't need rescuing because she's too busy plotting revenge. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Round tables dressed in ivory linens and gold accents filled the space, each centerpiece a small fortune in orchids and roses. Atlanta's elite moved through the room in designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos, air-kissing and networking with the practiced ease of people who measured their worth in influence and zeros. Simone Washington-Pierce arrived at 7:30, fashionably late but not late enough to make an entrance. She didn't need a dramatic arrival. She needed people settled, comfortable, distracted enough that what was coming would hit like a freight train. Her royal blue gown moved like water as she walked, the silk catching the light with every step. She'd had her hair styled at the salon that afternoon, elegant updo with a few artfully loosened tendrils framing her face. Diamond drop earrings that had been her grandmother's. Minimal makeup except for a bold red lip that said she wasn't here to blend in. Her clutch, small, elegant, expensive, held 3 things: her phone with the medical records pulled up and ready, a printed copy of the divorce filing timestamp, and her lawyer's business card. Everything else she needed was already in her head, rehearsed and refined over the past week until every word felt like a blade she'd sharpened to perfection. "Simone, you look absolutely stunning." Angela Morrison, wife of a prominent real estate developer, kissed both her cheeks. They'd served on a non-profit board together years ago. "Thank you, Angela. You look wonderful yourself." "I heard about you and Marcus," Angela said, lowering her voice in that way people do when discussing tragedy or scandal. "I'm so sorry. After all those years together." "These things happen," Simone said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes people show you who they really are, and you have to believe them." She moved through the room with practiced grace, accepting condolences from people who'd heard about the divorce filing, deflecting questions with polite non-answers. She chatted with James Bradford, CEO of a Fortune 500 company whose patents she'd protected. She laughed at a joke from Patricia Chun, a different Patricia, not her fertility doctor, who ran a venture capital firm. She was charming, professional, showing no signs of a woman about to detonate her life and her husband's in front of 200 witnesses. She saw colleagues from Caldwell and Ross at a table near the front. David Caldwell himself, the founding partner, raised his glass to her across the room. He knew what she was planning, not the details, but enough. He'd given her his blessing, told her that sometimes justice required theater. "Give them hell," he'd said in his office yesterday. "And make sure our firm's name is attached to the lawyer who took down Marcus Pierce." At 7:50, the energy in the room shifted. Simone felt it before she saw it, the way conversation stuttered, the way heads turned toward the entrance, the way whispers spread like ripples across water. Marcus had arrived. He looked good, she had to admit. Custom tuxedo that fit him perfectly, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Salt and pepper hair styled just so. The confident walk of a man who'd built an empire and sold it for millions. The smile of someone who thought he'd won. And on his arm, making absolutely no attempt to be discreet, was Vanessa Cho. The whispers became a low roar. Vanessa wore black. Of course she did, because she had no sense of subtlety or irony. A form-fitting dress that hugged every curve and prominently displayed her pregnant belly. 5 months along now, maybe 6, the bump impossible to miss and clearly meant to be seen. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves over her shoulders. Her makeup was Instagram-ready, contouring sharp enough to cut. She had one hand resting possessively on her stomach, the other wrapped around Marcus's arm. She wasn't dressed like a mistress trying to hide. She was dressed like a woman who'd already won, who was claiming her territory, who wanted everyone to see that she'd given Marcus what his wife couldn't. The room went quiet in sections, like dominoes falling. Everyone in Atlanta's black business community knew Marcus and Simone. Everyone knew about their struggles with infertility, not the details, but enough. Enough to know that Simone had spent years trying to have a child. Enough to know that it hadn't worked out. Enough to know that seeing Marcus's pregnant girlfriend at a public event was designed to be cruel. Simone stood near the bar, a glass of champagne in her hand, and watched her husband parade his pregnant mistress across the ballroom. She felt eyes on her, curious, pitying, waiting to see if she'd break down, if she'd cause a scene, if she'd run. She did none of those things. She smiled, took a sip of champagne, and waited. Marcus saw her, of course. Their eyes met across the room, and Simone watched the flash of uncertainty cross his face. He'd expected her to skip the gala, to hide, to avoid the humiliation of seeing him with Vanessa in public. But Simone had never run from a fight in her life. Marcus said something to Vanessa, who looked in Simone's direction and smiled, a smile that was all teeth and triumph. Then, incredibly, they started walking toward her. Simone's colleague Jennifer, a junior partner at Caldwell and Ross, appeared at her elbow. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "Do you want to leave?" "Not even a little bit," Simone said quietly. "In fact, this is about to get very interesting. You might want to step back." Jennifer hesitated, then moved a few feet away but stayed close enough to watch. Others were watching too, conversations dying as people sensed drama approaching. Marcus and Vanessa wove through the tables, and Simone noticed that several of Marcus's business associates had joined their orbit, men she'd known for years, men whose wives she'd had brunch with, men who should have known better than to publicly align themselves with this particular humiliation. They formed a small circle near where Simone stood. Marcus in his tuxedo, Vanessa with her hand on her pregnant belly, 3 business associates who looked uncomfortable but complicit. And Simone, alone in her blue gown, champagne glass steady in her hand. "Simone," Marcus said, his tone attempting casual concern and landing somewhere around condescending pity. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. It's a business leadership gala, Marcus. I'm a senior partner at one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms. Where else would I be?" Vanessa laughed, a tinkling, artificial sound. "Oh, Marcus mentioned you were a lawyer. That's so impressive." The words dripped with false sweetness, the compliment designed to sound like an insult. Up close, Vanessa was younger than she'd looked in surveillance photos. 28 but working hard to look sophisticated, her makeup a bit too heavy, her confidence performative. She positioned herself slightly in front of Marcus, her hand rubbing her belly in slow, deliberate circles. "You look beautiful tonight, Simone," Vanessa continued, and now her voice carried, loud enough for the people at nearby tables to hear. "That blue is stunning on you. Really brings out your eyes." Several people were openly watching now. Phones were out, ostensibly checking messages, but Simone knew at least some of them were recording. This was Atlanta society, scandal was currency, and this was about to be the scandal of the season. "You know what I've learned, Simone?" Vanessa said, still rubbing her belly, her voice projecting to their growing audience. "Some women are just built to give men what they really need. Real families. Not just empty promises and career ambitions." The words landed in the quiet room like grenades. Empty promises. Career ambitions. The implication was crystal clear. Simone had failed at the most basic female function. Simone had prioritized work over family. Simone was less than a woman. Vanessa looked down at her pregnant belly, then back up at Simone with a smile that was pure malice. "Marcus is going to be such an amazing father. Finally. Finally. After all those years with a wife who couldn't give him children. After all that time wasted on a woman whose body didn't work right." The cruelty was breathtaking in its precision. Vanessa had crafted each word to cut, to humiliate, to reduce Simone to her fertility struggles in front of everyone who mattered in their professional and social world. And Marcus laughed. Not a nervous, uncomfortable laugh. Not an awkward attempt to diffuse tension. A genuine, amused laugh that said he found his mistress's cruelty entertaining. His business partners, Daniel Wright, James Morrison, Kevin Chun, joined in. Men who'd known Simone for a decade. Men whose companies she'd provided legal counsel for. Men who were choosing, in this moment, to publicly participate in her humiliation. The circle of onlookers had grown. Simone could see people at nearby tables turn fully in their chairs, watching. She saw Angela Morrison with her hand over her mouth. She saw David Caldwell standing near the back, arms crossed, waiting. Someone was definitely recording. Probably multiple someones. This moment would be viral within hours. The humiliated wife confronted by the pregnant mistress while her husband laughed. The story would write itself. Successful career woman who couldn't have children, replaced by younger, fertile model. Except that wasn't the story at all. Simone set down her champagne glass on a nearby cocktail table. The small clink of crystal on marble seemed thunderous in the watching silence. She pulled her phone from her clutch, taking her time, letting the moment build. Let them think she was calling her lawyer, or her therapist, or fleeing in tears to call a friend. She wasn't. She pulled up the medical records she'd saved to her photos, the document she'd read so many times she'd memorized every word. Then she looked at Vanessa with a smile that made the younger woman's confidence falter, just for a second. "Vanessa," Simone said, her voice calm and clear and loud enough for everyone in their vicinity to hear. "Since you're so excited about giving Marcus what he needs, there's something both of you should know." She held up her phone, the medical document clearly visible on the screen. Several people leaned in, trying to see. "Marcus had a vasectomy 24 years ago," Simone announced, her courtroom voice carrying across the ballroom. "He's been sterile since he was 28 years old, years before we even met." The laughter stopped. Completely. The only sound was the distant music from another part of the venue and the clinking of ice in glasses as waiters froze mid-service. Simone didn't stop. This was her moment, and she'd earned it with 6 years of unnecessary pain. "So all those years I spent in fertility clinics," she continued, her voice steady despite the rage underneath it, "all those hormone injections, all those invasive procedures, all those doctors telling me my body was the problem, they were completely pointless. He made sure we'd never have children, and he let me believe I was the broken one." She turned to Marcus, whose face had gone from confident to ashen in the space of seconds. "Where did you get sealed medical records?" he demanded, his voice tight with shock and the beginning of fury. "I'm a lawyer, Marcus," Simone said, her attorney voice coming through strong and clear. I know how to subpoena documents. Especially when I'm preparing divorce papers. She saw the realization hit him. The divorce filing he'd been served, the one he thought he could smooth over, was more than just a filing. It was the opening move in a very public execution. I filed for divorce yesterday morning, Simone continued, addressing the crowd now as much as Marcus. The papers were served to your office at 9 a.m. And since you seem to have forgotten, I'm named on 60% of your patents. I wrote the legal frameworks for Pierce Analytics. I structured every major deal. And according to Georgia law, I'm entitled to half of everything acquired during our marriage. The business associates who'd been laughing minutes ago were backing away now, distancing themselves from the scandal blooming in front of them. But Simone wasn't finished. Not even close. She turned back to Vanessa, whose hand had frozen on her pregnant belly, whose face was slowly draining of color as the biological mathematics started to compute. And Vanessa, sweetheart, Simone said, her voice dropping to something almost gentle, almost pitying, since you're so proud of giving Marcus something real, you should know that according to basic biology, that baby you're carrying? It's not his. It can't be his. The room, already silent, somehow became quieter. People stopped breathing. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to Marcus, looking for rescue, for an explanation, for something. Marcus stared at her pregnant belly like he was seeing it for the first time. The betrayal on his face, the shock, the anger, the humiliation, was a mirror image of what he'd put Simone through, and the symmetry was almost beautiful. If you've been sterile for 24 years. Vanessa started, her voice small and cracking. Then that baby isn't mine, Marcus finished, his voice cold as he looked at her like she was a stranger. Like she was something contaminated. And Simone, standing in her blue gown with her phone in her hand and 200 witnesses watching, smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not a triumphant smile. Just the smile of a woman who'd spent 6 years being lied to and had finally, told the truth. Now, she said, looking around at the assembled crowd, at the phones recording, at the faces showing shock and fascination and the beginning of righteous anger on her behalf. Let me tell you the rest of the story. The ballroom had transformed into something between a courtroom and a theater, with Simone as both prosecutor and lead actress. She stood in the center of a growing circle of Atlanta's elite, her phone still held high, the medical records glowing on the screen like evidence mounted on a courtroom display. Marcus looked like he'd been struck. His perfect composure, the confident entrepreneur persona he'd cultivated for years, had cracked, revealing something desperate and furious underneath. Simone, put the phone down, he said, his voice low and urgent, trying to reassert control. This isn't the time or place. No, Marcus, Simone cut him off, her voice clear and unwavering. You chose the time and place when you brought your pregnant mistress to a public event specifically to humiliate me. You wanted everyone to see. So now everyone gets to see everything. She turned slightly, addressing the crowd that had gathered like a jury. For those of you who don't know the full story, Simone continued, her lawyer voice projecting perfectly across the marble floors, my husband and I spent 6 years trying to have a child. 6 years of fertility treatments. 6 years of doctor's appointments, hormone injections, invasive procedures that cost over $100,000 and put my body through hell. Several women in the crowd nodded, understanding. Fertility struggles weren't uncommon, but what came next was. Every single doctor blamed me, Simone said. My age, I was 35 when we started trying. My stress levels from my demanding career. My body's failure to produce viable eggs. Month after month, year after year, I was told that I was the problem. That my body was broken. Her voice didn't waver, but there was steel underneath it now. And Marcus sat beside me in those appointments. Held my hand while doctors examined me. Watched me inject myself with hormones that made me sick, that made my body swell, that wrecked my emotions. He watched me cry myself to sleep believing I was failing him as a wife. She looked directly at Marcus now, and the fury in her eyes could have cut glass. And the entire time, every single appointment, every injection, every failed cycle, he knew it was impossible. He'd had a vasectomy at 28 years old. Before we even met. He was permanently, irreversibly sterile, and he let me spend 6 years thinking I was the broken one. The crowd's reaction was audible now, gasps, whispers, a few angry mutters from women who understood exactly what that betrayal meant. "You're lying," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Those records are sealed. You can't." Simone pulled up another document on her phone, turning it to show the crowd. "Subpoena filed under Georgia Code December 24, 21, she said. "As Marcus's spouse, I had legal right to access medical records relevant to our marriage and my own health. Any lawyer in this room can confirm that." She looked around. "David? Patricia? Am I lying about the law?" David Caldwell stepped forward slightly. "She's absolutely correct. Medical records are accessible to spouses under specific circumstances. Divorce proceedings qualify." Simone nodded her thanks, then swiped to another image on her phone. The vasectomy was performed on March 15, 1996, at Emory University Hospital, she said, reading from the document. "Patient, Marcus Pierce. Confirmed understanding of permanent nature of procedure. Post-operative follow-up confirmed 0 sperm count. Procedure verified as successful and irreversible." She looked up at the crowd. 24 years ago. And he never told me. Not when we started dating. Not when we got engaged. Not when we had conversations about wanting children someday. Not during 6 years of fertility treatments. Never. Vanessa had gone completely pale, her hand still frozen on her pregnant belly. The math was computing, the implications spreading across her face like cracks in a windshield. "But you said..." She started, looking at Marcus. "You told me the problem was her. That she couldn't have children. That you wanted..." "You believed what you wanted to believe," Marcus snapped, turning on her now. His face was twisted with rage and humiliation, and Simone recognized the expression. It was the same one he'd worn when looking at her over the past year. Resentment. Blame. The look of a man who refused to accept responsibility for his own lies. "If you've been sterile for 24 years, Vanessa said, her voice rising toward panic, then whose?" "Exactly," Simone said, her voice cutting through Vanessa's spiral. "Whose baby is it, Vanessa?" She swiped to another set of photos on her phone, surveillance shots that Richard Chun had provided. She held them up for the crowd to see. "These photos were taken over the past 3 weeks, Simone announced. "That's you, Vanessa, entering an apartment building in Buckhead. Multiple times. Staying overnight. The apartment belongs to Tyler Morrison, personal trainer, age 29, who according to your Instagram used to be your favorite person until about 9 months ago." The photos showed Vanessa and a tall, athletic man having dinner. Walking into an apartment building together. His car parked outside her place overnight. "The timeline is interesting," Simone continued, her voice almost conversational now, like she was presenting evidence to a jury. "You started working more closely with Marcus about 10 months ago. The affair began around 8 months ago. But you were still seeing Tyler throughout that period. And conception would have occurred approximately 5 to 6 months ago, right in the middle of when you were juggling both relationships." Vanessa's eyes were wide, darting between Marcus and Simone and the crowd of witnesses. "You had me followed," she managed. "I had my cheating husband followed," Simone corrected. "You just happened to be in the frame. Though I did have my investigator expand surveillance once I realized you were pregnant with a baby that biologically couldn't be Marcus's." She turned to address the crowd again. "Tyler Morrison has already hired a family law attorney. He's prepared to file for paternity rights because he believes, correctly I'd wager, that he's the biological father. DNA tests will confirm it, of course, but the timeline, the relationship, and basic biology all point in one direction." Marcus was staring at Vanessa like he'd never seen her before. "You told me you ended things with Tyler," he said, his voice dangerous. "You said you'd broken up. That the baby was..." "That the baby was what you wanted to hear," Simone finished for him. "She saw a wealthy man desperate for a child and gave him the fantasy. Except she didn't know about your vasectomy, so her con fell apart the moment I pulled the medical records." Simone wasn't done. She'd waited 6 years for this moment, and she was going to make every second count. "Let's talk about assets," she said, pulling up another document. "Pierce Analytics, the company Marcus sold for $47 million 3 years ago. I'm named as co-inventor on 60% of the patents. I wrote the legal frameworks that protected the intellectual property. I negotiated the licensing deals that made the company profitable. I structured the acquisition that made Marcus a multimillionaire." She showed the document to the crowd, patent filings with both her name and Marcus's clearly visible. "According to Georgia's equitable distribution law, I'm entitled to half of all marital assets. That includes the proceeds from the sale, the investment portfolio, the real estate holdings, and the ongoing royalties from the patents still generating income." David Caldwell was smiling now, proud of his protégé. "My attorneys have calculated the total at approximately $28 million, Simone continued. "And unlike Marcus, I have documentation for every contribution I made. Every late night working on patent applications. Every contract I drafted. Every deal I structured. It's all documented, time-stamped, and legally airtight." Marcus's business associates were backing away now, creating physical distance from the scandal. No one wanted to be associated with a man who'd publicly imploded this spectacularly. "You can't do this," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its power. He sounded like a man watching his life collapse in real time. "I already did," Simone said. "Divorce papers filed yesterday. Served to your office at 9 a.m. Asset documentation submitted to the court this afternoon. Everything's in motion, Marcus. This isn't a negotiation. This is me telling you, and everyone here, exactly what you are." She stepped closer to him, her voice dropping but still audible to the surrounding crowd. "You're a liar who let his wife believe she was broken for 6 years. You're a cheat who brought his pregnant mistress to a public event to humiliate the woman who built your fortune. And you're a fool who didn't realize that same woman is one of the best attorneys in this city." The ballroom exploded into noise. Conversations erupted like wildfire. Phones were out everywhere now, no pretense of discretion. Video was being recorded, photos taken, texts sent. The story was going viral in real time. #GalaRevenge would be trending within the hour. Vanessa was crying now, mascara running down her face in black rivers, her carefully constructed Instagram-perfect appearance destroyed. "Marcus, please, we need to talk." "Don't touch me," Marcus snarled, pulling away from her. The man who'd laughed at his wife's humiliation minutes ago was now experiencing his own betrayal, and he wore it badly. "You lied to me. You said. You lied to your wife for 12 years. Vanessa shouted back, her composure completely shattered. "You don't get to play victim." "Neither do you," Simone said quietly, and both of them turned to look at her. "You're both liars. You both used people. You both thought you could get away with it. And now everyone knows exactly who you are." Marcus lunged toward Simone, his face contorted with rage. "You bitch. You planned this. You manipulated." Two things happened simultaneously. David Caldwell stepped between them, his bulk blocking Marcus's path, and hotel security appeared from the edges of the crowd, having been alerted to a disturbance. "I'd be very careful about your next words, Mr. Pierce," David said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable threat. "You're already on camera assaulting a woman. I don't think you want to add to tonight's viral content." Marcus stopped, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. He looked around at the crowd, 200 witnesses, dozens of cameras, his entire professional and social world watching him implode. "We're done talking," Simone said, her voice steady and final. "My attorney will be in touch. Don't contact me directly. Any communication goes through my legal team." She pulled a business card from her clutch and held it out. "Here's my attorney's information. Have your lawyer call her. Though you should know, Patricia Morrison is the best divorce attorney in Atlanta. She's going to take you apart piece by piece." Marcus didn't take the card. He just stood there, his whole body radiating impotent fury, watching the life he'd built crumble around him. Simone turned to Vanessa, who was still crying, still touching her pregnant belly like it was a talisman that had failed to protect her. Good luck with Tyler, Simone said. I hope he's better to you than you were to him. Though based on tonight's performance, I'm guessing he's going to have some questions about your character. Simone turned and walked toward the exit, her blue gown flowing behind her like royalty leaving a throne room. The crowd parted without her having to ask, creating a clear path to the door. She could hear the chaos behind her, Marcus and Vanessa arguing, security trying to calm the situation, the buzz of hundreds of conversations dissecting what had just happened. She could feel the phones recording her exit, capturing the image of a woman who'd just destroyed 2 lives without raising her voice or losing her composure. David Caldwell caught up with her at the door. That, he said quietly, was the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed. You should consider litigation. You have a gift for public evisceration. I prefer to use my powers for good, Simone said, but she was smiling. Though I have to admit, that felt pretty damn good. Your phone's going to explode within the hour, David warned. This is going viral. You ready for that? I've been ready for 6 years, Simone said. She walked out of the St. Regis into the warm Atlanta night, leaving behind the wreckage of Marcus's reputation and Vanessa's carefully constructed con. Her phone was already buzzing with texts, friends, colleagues, reporters who'd somehow gotten her number. She ignored all of them. She got into her car, drove home to her penthouse in Midtown, poured herself a very expensive glass of bourbon, and watched Atlanta's social media explode. By 10 p.m., #GalaRevenge was trending nationally. By 11 p.m., Black Twitter had mobilized in her defense. By midnight, legal professionals across the country were praising her tactical brilliance. The videos were everywhere, multiple angles of the confrontation, each one showing Marcus and Vanessa's cruelty, then their absolute destruction when Simone revealed the truth. The comments were overwhelmingly in her favor. She came with receipts, medical records, patent documentation, divorce filings. This is how you handle a cheater. 6 years of fertility treatments while he knew he was sterile? That's not just cheating, that's emotional abuse. Prosecute him. The mistress really thought she could publicly humiliate the wife, not knowing the wife is a top attorney with evidence. The audacity. Marcus Pierce's business reputation is done. Who's going to partner with a man who lies about something this fundamental for over a decade? The Atlanta Journal-Constitution had a story posted by 1 a.m. Prominent tech entrepreneur exposed at charity gala for decade-long fertility deception. Legal blogs were already analyzing the case, discussing the implications of the vasectomy concealment, the potential for fraud charges, the complexity of the asset division. Vanessa's Instagram had gone private within an hour of the confrontation. Her follower count was dropping by the thousands as people flooded the comments on her old posts with accusations and anger. Tyler Morrison's attorney had released a brief statement. My client is seeking paternity rights and full custody. We believe Ms. Cho has engaged in paternity fraud, and we will be pursuing all available legal remedies. And Marcus's professional world was collapsing in real time. By 2 a.m., 3 of his business partners had released statements distancing themselves from him. By morning, he'd resigned from 2 nonprofit boards. His reputation, carefully built over decades, had been destroyed in one evening. Simone sat on her couch, bourbon in hand, watching it all unfold on her laptop. She felt, not happy exactly. Not triumphant. Just exhausted and vindicated and free. Her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Morrison, her divorce attorney. That was either the most brilliant or most reckless thing I've ever seen. Possibly both. His attorney called. They want to settle. Fast. We're in a very strong position. Call me tomorrow. Another text, this one from Richard Chun, the private investigator. You're my new favorite client. That was spectacular. Let me know if you ever need surveillance again. First hours on the house. And one more, from David Caldwell. The firm's phones are ringing off the hook. Every woman in Atlanta with a cheating husband wants you to represent them. You just became our most valuable asset. We should talk about a partnership track. Well done, counselor. Simone smiled and set down her phone. Tomorrow would bring challenges, media requests, legal negotiations, the long process of actually dissolving a 12-year marriage and claiming what was rightfully hers. But tonight, she'd done what she came to do. She'd told the truth in front of 200 witnesses. She'd exposed the lies she'd been living for 6 years. She'd taken back her power with documentation, legal precision, and the kind of strategic patience that made her an exceptional attorney. Marcus had tried to break her by mocking what he called her failure. Instead, she'd broken him with nothing but the truth. And the truth, as it turned out, was devastating when delivered by a woman who knew exactly how to build an airtight case and present it to a jury of her peers. Simone raised her glass in a solitary toast to the woman in the mirror, the one who'd survived 6 years of unnecessary pain, who'd endured humiliation and gaslighting and betrayal, and who'd come out the other side not broken, but sharpened. To truth, she said to her reflection, and to never being anyone's victim again. The city lights of Atlanta glittered outside her window, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Vanessa were dealing with the wreckage of their exposed lies. But that was their problem now. Simone was done carrying other people's sins. She was free. Simone woke at 6 a.m. to 347 missed calls. She lay in bed for a moment, staring at her ceiling, listening to her phone buzz continuously on the nightstand like an angry hornet. The morning light filtered through her bedroom windows, soft and golden, completely at odds with the chaos waiting in her notifications. She reached for her phone and scrolled through the madness. 17 voicemails from reporters. 23 from numbers she didn't recognize. 5 from her mother. Oh God, her mother had seen the videos. 3 from Marcus's number, deleted without listening. 12 from colleagues at Caldwell and Ross. And 1 from a New York number with a message that made her sit up. Ms. Washington-Pierce, this is Shauna Mitchell from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you on the show to discuss last night's events. This is an important conversation about fertility deception and medical gaslighting. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. Simone set the phone down and took a long, steadying breath. It had really happened. Last night wasn't a fever dream or a carefully rehearsed fantasy. She'd actually stood in front of Atlanta's elite and dismantled her husband's life with medical records and legal documents. And now the whole country was watching. By the time Simone showered and made coffee, the story had reached national news. She turned on CNN and there it was, footage from the gala, someone's cell phone video of the confrontation, Simone's voice clear and unwavering as she announced Marcus's vasectomy to a room full of witnesses. The cheerin' read, Atlanta attorney exposes husband's decade-long fertility lie at charity gala. The anchors were discussing it like it was a Supreme Court case. The legal implications here are fascinating, one commentator said. If he knowingly concealed a vasectomy while his wife underwent fertility treatments, that could constitute fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Not to mention the emotional abuse, another cut in. 6 years of letting her believe her body was broken. That's psychological torture. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution had the story on the front page, above the fold. The headline, Prominent Attorney Reveals Tech Entrepreneur's Vasectomy Secret, Mistress's Pregnancy Deception at High-Profile Gala. Her phone rang. David Caldwell. Don't answer any media requests without talking to me first, he said without preamble. You're viral, Simone. National news. This is bigger than Atlanta now. We need to control the narrative. What narrative? Simone asked, pouring herself more coffee. I told the truth. That's the only narrative there is. The truth is messier than you think. Marcus's PR team is already spinning this. They're calling it a private marital dispute that you weaponized publicly. They're saying you violated his medical privacy, which I had legal right to access as his spouse during divorce proceedings, Simone interrupted. Any first-year law student knows that. I know. But not everyone watching CNN is a lawyer. We need to get ahead of this. I've scheduled a press conference for tomorrow. You, me, and Patricia Morrison. We present this as what it is, a case of systematic deception and medical gaslighting. Simone closed her eyes. A press conference. Of course. Because a viral confrontation wasn't enough, now she had to defend herself to the national media. Fine, she said. Tomorrow. But I'm not apologizing for anything. I wouldn't dream of asking you to, David said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. You're a hero to every woman who's been gaslit by a partner. Lean into it. By noon, Marcus's world was burning. Simone watched it happen from her office at Caldwell and Ross, where she'd gone to escape the reporters camping outside her building. Her paralegal brought her updates like battlefield reports. Marcus resigned from the Technology Innovation Board, Jennifer said, setting down a fresh coffee. Statement says he wants to focus on personal matters. An hour later, 2 more business partners issued statements. They're distancing themselves from Pierce Analytics and any future ventures with Marcus. By 2 p.m., his lawyer called. 3rd time this morning. They really want to settle. Simone pulled up Marcus's social media, something she'd avoided for months. His Instagram, once full of motivational quotes and humblebrags about business success, was a wasteland. The comments on every post were brutal. You let your wife suffer through fertility treatments while you knew you were sterile? You're disgusting. Imagine being so cruel that you gaslight your partner for 6 years about something this fundamental. Jail. Every business deal you made, she was part of. Every patent, she helped create. And you brought your pregnant mistress to humiliate her? You deserve everything coming to you. His LinkedIn had been updated, former positions at several companies, as if they'd scrubbed him from their history. Simone's paralegal appeared again. Marcus is in the lobby. Security won't let him up, but he's demanding to see you. Absolutely not, Simone said. Tell security if he doesn't leave, we'll call the police for trespassing. Already told them. Just wanted you to know. 5 minutes later, Jennifer was back. He's gone. But not before shouting at the security guard that you destroyed his life. Simone looked up from her computer. I destroyed his life? I simply told the truth about what he did to mine. If the truth destroyed him, that's on him. Vanessa Cho's implosion was somehow even more spectacular. Her Instagram, which had been private since last night, leaked anyway. Screenshots circulated on Twitter showing her recent posts. The pregnancy announcement. The motivational quotes about deserving good things. The carefully curated aesthetic of a woman living her best life. The comments were merciless. Someone had found her old posts with Tyler Morrison, the ones she'd archived or deleted when she'd started seeing Marcus. Twitter detectives had tracked down Tyler's Instagram, found photos of him at the same restaurants, the same vacation spots, during the time Vanessa claimed to be exclusively with Marcus. By afternoon, Tyler's attorney had released a longer statement. My client, Tyler Morrison, has been in a committed relationship with Vanessa Cho for 3 years. He was unaware of her involvement with Marcus Pierce until recently. He believes himself to be the biological father of Ms. Cho's unborn child and is pursuing paternity rights. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. 3 years. Vanessa had been with Tyler for 3 years, which meant she'd started seeing Marcus while already in a relationship. She'd been juggling both men, trying to trade up from a personal trainer to a tech millionaire, using a pregnancy to seal the deal. Except she'd miscalculated everything. Simone's phone rang. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Simone. A woman's voice, young and shaking. It's Vanessa. Please don't hang up. Simone should have hung up. Should have blocked the number. Should have let her attorney handle all communication. She didn't. You have 60 seconds, Simone said. I'm sorry. Vanessa was crying, her voice breaking. I know that means nothing, I know I don't deserve, but I'm sorry. I didn't know about the vasectomy. I swear I didn't know. But you knew you were lying about the baby, Simone said, her voice cold. You knew Tyler was the father, and you were passing it off as Marcus's. Silence. Then, yes. And you knew Marcus was married. You knew he'd spent years trying to have children with his wife. You knew exactly how cruel it would be to parade your pregnancy in front of me. I thought you couldn't have kids. That it was your fault. Marcus said. Marcus lied, Simone cut her off. To both of us. The difference is, I was his wife. You were just his employee who saw an opportunity and took it. You don't get to play victim here, Vanessa. More crying. I lost my job. I lost Tyler. My family won't speak to me. Everyone on the internet is calling me a con artist, a liar, a woman who tried to trap a rich man with another man's baby. Simone's voice was sharp. Because that's what you are. You're experiencing consequences, Vanessa. Not persecution. Consequences. What do I do? Vanessa sounded desperate, young, lost. For a moment, just a moment, Simone felt something like pity. Vanessa was 28, pregnant, publicly humiliated, alone. She'd made terrible choices and was paying for them in real time. Then Simone remembered standing in that ballroom, listening to Vanessa mock her for not having children, for being nothing but empty promises and career ambitions. The pity evaporated. You tell Tyler the truth, Simone said. You get a paternity test when the baby's born. You deal with the consequences of lying to two men about who fathered your child. And you leave Marcus and me out of it. We're done with you. Simone. Simone hung up. She sat in her office, hands shaking slightly, and realized she felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not even pity. Just nothing. Vanessa was irrelevant. A footnote in a larger story about lies and betrayal. She had bigger problems to deal with. Patricia Morrison's office was all glass and steel, with a view of downtown Atlanta that screamed success. Simone sat across from her attorney, reviewing the settlement proposal that Marcus's lawyer had submitted. It's insulting, Patricia said, sliding the document across her desk. He's offering $15 million, claiming that your contributions to Pierce Analytics were supportive but not essential. He's trying to diminish your role in building the company. Simone scanned the proposal, her lawyer's brain automatically cataloging the weaknesses in his argument. We have documentation of every patent application I worked on, she said. Time-stamped emails. Contract drafts with my edits. Licensing agreements I negotiated. He can claim I was supportive all he wants. The paperwork tells a different story. Exactly, Patricia said, smiling like a shark. Which is why we're going to reject this and counter with our original demand. $28 million, half of all marital assets, plus compensation for emotional distress related to the fertility deception. Can we get emotional distress damages in a divorce case? Probably not. But asking for them makes him sweat. Makes him realize we're not playing nice. Patricia leaned back in her chair. His lawyer knows they're screwed, Simone. The public opinion is entirely on your side. Every piece of evidence supports your claim. And the vasectomy deception is so egregious that any judge who hears this case is going to crucify him. How long until this is over? If he's smart? 6 months. He'll settle, we'll finalize the division of assets, and you walk away with everything you're entitled to. If he's stupid and tries to fight it, could be a year or more. But every day he drags this out, his reputation gets worse. The lawyers I've talked to think he'll settle within 3 months. Simone nodded, feeling the weight of it settling on her shoulders. 3 to 6 more months of lawyers and negotiations and documents. 3 to 6 more months of her life tied to a man she'd already mourned. Make it hurt, she said quietly. Every filing, every motion, every communication. Make sure he knows exactly what it costs to lie to someone for 12 years. Patricia's smile widened. With pleasure. Back at her apartment that evening, Simone finally allowed herself to read the messages that had been piling up. Her mother had called 17 times. Simone called her back, bracing for either fury or sympathy. She wasn't sure which would be worse. Baby girl, her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. I saw the videos. All of it. What that man did to you. Mom. No, let me finish. What he did was cruel. Evil. And you standing up there and telling the truth in front of all those people? I have never been more proud of you in my entire life. Simone felt tears prick her eyes for the first time since the gala. Really? Really? Your grandmother would have been so proud. She always said you had steel in your spine. You proved it last night. They talked for an hour. Her mother told her about the calls she'd received. From relatives, from friends, from women in her church who'd seen the news and wanted to express their support for Simone. There are a lot of women who've been through something similar, her mother said. Maybe not exactly the same, but close enough. Men who lied about wanting children. Men who blamed their wives for fertility problems that weren't their fault. You gave them permission to be angry, baby. You showed them what it looks like to demand the truth. After she hung up with her mother, Simone scrolled through her emails. Hundreds of messages from strangers. Thank you for speaking out. My husband blamed me for our fertility issues for 8 years. Turns out he had a low sperm count he never disclosed. Your story gave me the courage to file for divorce. I'm a fertility doctor, and I cannot tell you how often I see situations like this. Men who refuse to get tested. Men who let their wives go through invasive procedures rather than admit there might be a problem on their end. What you did was brave. I'm a family law attorney in Chicago. Can I use your case in my lectures on reproductive coercion and medical gaslighting? What Marcus did needs to be recognized as a form of abuse. Message after message. Stories of women who'd been lied to, gaslit, blamed for reproductive issues that weren't their responsibility. Women who'd spent years believing their bodies were broken, only to discover later that their partners had lied or withheld information. Simone sat on her couch, reading story after story, and realized something. This was bigger than her marriage. Bigger than Marcus's betrayal. This was about a pattern of deception that happened more often than anyone wanted to acknowledge. And she just put a spotlight on it in the most public way possible. The next morning, Simone stood in a conference room at Caldwell & Ross, flanked by David and Patricia, facing a room full of reporters and cameras. She dressed carefully, a navy suit, professional but not severe. Hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. She looked like what she was, a serious attorney who wasn't playing games. David spoke first, laying out the legal framework. Then Patricia discussed the divorce proceedings and asset division. Then it was Simone's turn. She stepped up to the microphone and looked directly at the cameras. My name is Simone Washington-Pierce, and I'm a corporate attorney specializing in intellectual property law. 2 nights ago, I attended the Atlanta Business Leadership Gala and publicly disclosed information about my husband's medical history and our fertility struggles. I want to address why I chose to handle this matter publicly rather than privately. She took a breath, centered herself. For 6 years, I underwent fertility treatments. I subjected my body to hormone injections, invasive procedures, and multiple IVF cycles. I was told repeatedly by medical professionals that the problem was my age, my stress level, my body's failure to produce viable eggs. I internalized that blame. I believed I was failing my husband and failing as a woman. Her voice was steady, professional, but underneath it was steel. What I didn't know, what I wasn't told, was that my husband had undergone a vasectomy in 1996, years before we met. He was permanently, irreversibly sterile. Every fertility treatment I endured was medically unnecessary. Every doctor's appointment where I was blamed for our inability to conceive was based on incomplete information because my husband chose not to disclose his vasectomy. The room was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. When I discovered this information through legally obtained medical records during divorce proceedings, I made a choice. I chose to tell the truth publicly because my husband had chosen to humiliate me publicly by bringing his pregnant mistress to a charity event where our colleagues and friends would witness what he thought was my failure. Simone's eyes were hard now, but the failure wasn't mine. The failure was his. Failure to be honest, failure to respect his wife's bodily autonomy, failure to acknowledge that letting someone undergo unnecessary medical procedures while withholding relevant information is not just cruel, it's abusive. She paused, letting that word hang in the air. I'm speaking publicly about this because I know I'm not alone. Fertility is weaponized in relationships more often than we acknowledge. Women are blamed for reproductive issues that aren't their fault. Men withhold information about their own fertility status rather than admit there might be a problem on their end. This isn't just about my marriage. This is about a pattern of deception that needs to be recognized and addressed. A reporter raised her hand. Do you regret exposing your husband publicly? No, Simone said without hesitation. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that he made choices that led to this moment. But I don't regret telling the truth. What about Vanessa Cho and the pregnancy? That's between her, my husband, and Tyler Morrison, who I understand is the biological father. I wish them all the best in resolving that situation. What's next for you? Simone smiled slightly. I'm finalizing my divorce, continuing my work at Caldwell and Ross, and exploring opportunities to provide legal support to women in similar situations. I've been contacted by several organizations that deal with reproductive rights and medical advocacy. I'm considering how I can use my experience and my legal expertise to help others. The press conference lasted 45 minutes. By the time it was over, Simone felt exhausted but vindicated. She'd controlled the narrative, presented her case to the court of public opinion, and made it clear that she wasn't a victim. She was a survivor who'd fought back. The response was overwhelming. #StandWithSimone trended for 3 days. Legal organizations reached out about speaking engagements. Women's advocacy groups invited her to join their boards. And Marcus's settlement offer increased to $25 million with a note from his attorney. Let's end this quickly and quietly. Simone smiled when she read it. Quietly? That ship had sailed. But ended? Yes. She was ready for this chapter to close. She was ready to move on. And she had plans, big plans, for what came next. 6 months later, Simone stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows in her new penthouse overlooking Piedmont Park, watching the Atlanta sunrise paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The settlement had been finalized 3 weeks ago, $28 million, exactly what she'd asked for, plus Marcus keeping his mouth shut with an ironclad NDA that prevented him from ever publicly discussing their marriage or the circumstances of their divorce. She'd won. Completely and absolutely. But winning, she discovered, was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Washington Foundation Board meeting 9 a.m. Simone smiled and turned from the window to get ready for the day. The foundation's offices occupied the 10th floor of a building in Midtown, all glass and natural light, with a conference room that could seat 20. Simone had assembled a board of directors that read like a who's who of Atlanta's most influential women: 3 attorneys, 2 doctors, a psychologist specializing in trauma, and Angela Morrison, who'd watched the gala confrontation and immediately volunteered to help. Good morning, everyone, Simone said, taking her seat at the head of the table. Let's start with the numbers. Their executive director, a brilliant woman named Lisa Chun who'd left a non-profit position to join them, pulled up a presentation. In 6 months, we've provided free legal services to 147 women, Lisa said. Cases range from fertility deception like yours, Simone, to reproductive coercion, contraceptive sabotage, and medical gaslighting. We've helped secure restraining orders, divorce settlements, and in 3 cases, criminal charges against partners who deliberately tampered with birth control. Success rate? Asked Dr. Patricia Chun, not her fertility doctor, but a gynecologist who'd been horrified by Simone's story and wanted to help. 93% favorable outcomes. Most cases settle once we get involved. Turns out having a legal team with resources and media attention makes abusive partners reconsider their strategies. Simone nodded, feeling the satisfaction of work that mattered. What about the hotline? Averaging 200 calls a week. We've had to expand our volunteer attorney network to keep up. The publicity from your case brought in over 500 lawyers willing to provide pro bono services. The gala confrontation that had destroyed her marriage had also created something meaningful. Women across the country had seen her story and recognized their own struggles. They'd reached out, by email, phone, social media, sharing stories of partners who'd lied about vasectomies, about fertility status, about wanting children. Stories of women who'd undergone unnecessary treatments, who'd been blamed for reproductive issues that weren't their fault, who'd been gaslit into believing their bodies were broken. And Simone had decided to do something about it. The Washington Foundation provided free legal services, connected women with medical advocates, and offered support groups for those dealing with fertility-related trauma. They'd partnered with reproductive rights organizations, medical associations, and legal aid societies. They were building something real, something that would outlast the viral moment that had created it. "We have the fundraising gala next month," Angela said, consulting her notes. "Ticket sales are already at capacity. We've raised over $2 million in corporate sponsorships." "Who's confirmed for speaking?" "You, obviously. Dr. Jennifer Park from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Professor Michael Torres from Emory Law, who's developing a legal framework for recognizing reproductive coercion as domestic abuse. And we have a surprise guest, Tyler Morrison." Simone looked up sharply. "Tyler Morrison? Vanessa's Tyler." He reached out through his attorney. "Wants to share his perspective as someone who was also deceived. He thinks it's important for men to speak out against this kind of manipulation too." Simone considered this. Tyler had been another victim in Vanessa's scheme, lied to and used just like she'd been lied to and used by Marcus. Maybe there was value in showing that these patterns of deception hurt everyone involved. "Approved," she said. "But make sure he understands this isn't about his relationship drama. It's about the bigger pattern." "Already done." His attorney was very clear about his intentions. After the board meeting, Simone had lunch with David Caldwell at a restaurant near the office. "Senior partner," he said, raising his wine glass. "Effective immediately." The vote was unanimous. "You've brought in more business in 6 months than some partners bring in over years. Every woman in Atlanta with a high-stakes divorce wants you on their team." "I'm not taking divorce cases," Simone reminded him. "My focus is corporate law and the foundation. Which is why we're creating a new division. Reproductive rights and medical advocacy law. You'll head it. We'll bring in associates to handle the caseload, but it'll operate under your oversight. Caldwell and Ross wants to be known as the firm that takes these cases seriously." Simone felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the opportunity, the chance to turn her pain into something that helped others. "I accept," she said. "On one condition, 10% of the division's profits go directly to the Washington Foundation." David smiled. "Already written into the proposal. You're not the only one who believes in this work, Simone." They discussed logistics for the next hour, hiring plans, caseload management, media strategy. Simone's profile had made her a legal celebrity, and David was shrewd enough to leverage that for the firm's benefit while supporting work that mattered. When lunch ended and Simone walked back to her car, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, genuine excitement about the future. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to save a failing marriage, but the quiet confidence of someone building exactly the life they wanted. Simone was leaving the office at 6 p.m. when she literally bumped into someone in the parking garage. "I'm so sorry," she started, then stopped. Jonathan Wright stood in front of her, looking exactly as she remembered from the constitutional law seminar they'd both attended 2 years ago. Tall with warm brown eyes behind stylish glasses, a gentle smile that suggested he laughed easily. "Simone Washington-Pierce," he said, and she couldn't tell if he was surprised or pleased. "I wondered if I'd run into you eventually." "Professor Wright," she said, recovering her composure. "Still teaching at Emory?" "Still teaching. And still going by Jonathan in non-academic settings." He shifted the briefcase he was carrying. "I've been following your work with the foundation. It's impressive." "Thank you." She studied him, trying to remember what she knew about Jonathan Wright. Law professor, specializing in family law and constitutional rights. Never married, she thought, or maybe divorced. "What brings you to Caldwell and Ross?" "Consulting on a case. Your firm is representing a client with some interesting First Amendment questions." He paused, then said, "I also saw the videos. From the gala. I hope it's not inappropriate to say that what you did was remarkably brave. Or remarkably reckless, depending on who you ask." "Brave," Jonathan said firmly. "Taking back your narrative, refusing to be silenced, that took courage. And the foundation you've built from it is making a real difference." They stood in the parking garage, the concrete and fluorescent lights an absurd backdrop for what felt like a significant moment. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Jonathan asked, and there was something tentative in his voice, like he was worried about overstepping. "I'd love to hear more about the Foundation's work. And I've been developing some curriculum on reproductive rights law. I'd value your input." Simone hesitated. 6 months ago, she'd been married. 6 months ago, the idea of having coffee with an attractive man would have felt like betrayal, even though her marriage had been a lie. But she wasn't that woman anymore. "Coffee would be nice," she said. "Though fair warning, I have very strong opinions about reproductive rights law." Jonathan smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "I would expect nothing less. How's Thursday at 2? "Thursday at 2 works." They exchanged numbers, made plans to meet at a cafe near Emory's campus. When Simone got into her car, she was smiling in a way that felt unfamiliar, not the grim satisfaction of winning a legal battle, but something lighter. Something that felt like possibility. Thursday arrived faster than Simone expected. She told herself it was a professional meeting, just 2 legal professionals discussing academic matters. She told herself this right up until she spent 20 minutes deciding what to wear and changed her outfit 3 times. Jonathan was already at the cafe when she arrived, 2 cups of coffee on the table and a stack of papers that suggested he'd actually brought work to discuss. "Constitutional law professor who's punctual and prepared," Simone said, sitting down. "I'm impressed." "Former Boy Scout," Jonathan said with a self-deprecating smile. "Can't shake the habits." "I got you a latte. I hope that's okay." "I took a guess." "Perfect guess." They talked about the Foundation for the first 30 minutes. Jonathan asked intelligent questions about the legal frameworks they were using, the challenges they'd faced, the cases that had been most impactful. He shared his curriculum ideas, asked for her feedback, genuinely seemed to value her expertise. Then, naturally, the conversation shifted. "Can I ask you something personal?" Jonathan said. "You don't have to answer." "Go ahead." "How are you doing? Really? Not the professional, competent attorney version, the actual human being who went through something traumatic." Simone was quiet for a moment, considering. She'd given so many interviews, answered so many questions about her experience. But they were always framed as empowerment narratives, inspiring stories of a woman who fought back. No one had simply asked how she was doing. "Some days are better than others," she said honestly. "The Foundation helps, turning the pain into something useful. But there are moments when I'm still angry. Not at Marcus, exactly. More at the time I lost. The years I spent believing I was broken." "That's grief," Jonathan said gently. "Grief for the life you thought you had, the future you imagined. That's legitimate." "Are you therapizing me, Professor Wright?" "Just recognizing what grief looks like. I went through a divorce 7 years ago. Different circumstances, but the feeling of mourning a future that never existed. I understand that." "You were married?" "For 5 years. We wanted different things, fundamentally incompatible things. She wanted children. I have a daughter from a previous relationship, and I was honest from the beginning that I didn't want more kids. We thought we could make it work anyway." He shook his head. "We couldn't. But we were honest with each other, at least. That matters." "You have a daughter?" "Mia. She's 12 now. Brilliant, terrifying, asks questions that make me question every legal philosophy I've ever taught." His face softened when he talked about her, love evident in every word. "She lives with her mother in California, but I see her every summer and during holidays." They talked for 2 hours. The cafe filled and emptied around them, afternoon shifting into evening, and neither of them noticed. Jonathan told her about his daughter, about the joy and terror of single parenthood, about how fatherhood had changed his understanding of family law and parental rights. Simone told him about the Foundation, about the women she'd helped, about finding purpose in advocacy work. And somewhere in the conversation, it stopped being a professional meeting and became something else. Something that felt like the beginning of a friendship. Maybe more. "I should let you go," Jonathan said finally, checking his watch. "I have a faculty meeting in an hour that I'm woefully unprepared for." "This was nice," Simone said, and meant it. "Thank you for asking how I'm doing. Not many people do. Can we do this again? Coffee conversation, maybe actual dinner next time." Simone smiled. "I'd like that." They exchanged a few more words, made tentative plans for the following week, and parted ways. Simone drove home feeling lighter than she had in months, like maybe there was space in her life for something other than work and legal battles and righteous anger. Maybe there was space for something gentle. Something that felt like hope. The Washington Foundation's first annual fundraising gala was everything Simone had hoped for. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton was packed with 400 guests, lawyers, doctors, advocates, donors, and women who'd been helped by the foundation. The atmosphere was elegant but purposeful, celebration mixed with mission. Simone wore emerald green, a color that made her feel powerful and vibrant. She worked the room with practiced ease, thanking donors, introducing board members, making sure everyone understood the work they were supporting. Jonathan was there, not as her date exactly, but sitting at her table, Mia beside him during her summer visit. The 12-year-old was whip-smart and opinionated, asking Simone-pointed questions about legal advocacy and gender discrimination that would have impressed law school professors. "I like her," Simone whispered to Jonathan during the cocktail hour. "She's terrifying." "Wait until she starts asking about your specific cases," Jonathan whispered back. "She read 3 articles about you and has questions." The program began at 8. Angela Morrison, as Foundation Board President, spoke first about their mission and achievements. Dr. Chun discussed the medical implications of reproductive coercion. Professor Torres outlined the legal framework they were developing. Then it was Simone's turn. She stood at the podium, looking out at 400 faces, and felt the weight of what this moment represented. A year ago, she'd stood in a different ballroom and destroyed her marriage with medical records and legal documents. Tonight, she was standing in front of people who wanted to build something, not tear something down. "A year ago," Simone began, her voice steady and clear, "I stood in a ballroom not unlike this one and told a truth that changed my life. I exposed a pattern of deception and medical gaslighting that had defined my marriage for over a decade. That moment went viral, and in its aftermath, thousands of women reached out to share their own stories." She paused, looking around the room. Stories of partners who lied about fertility status. Stories of women who underwent unnecessary medical procedures because their partners wouldn't be honest. Stories of blame and shame and years spent believing their bodies were broken when the real problem was trust that had been broken. "I started the Washington Foundation because I realized my story wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern of reproductive coercion and medical manipulation that happens more often than we want to acknowledge. And I realized that as an attorney with resources and a platform, I had an opportunity to do something about it." She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from their first 6 months. "In 6 months, we've helped 147 women. We've provided free legal services, connected them with medical advocates, offered support groups and counseling. We've helped secure restraining orders against abusive partners. We've negotiated divorce settlements that recognize the harm done. And in several cases, we've helped pursue criminal charges against partners who deliberately sabotaged birth control or lied about fertility status." The room was silent, attentive. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The real story is in the individual women we've helped. The woman who spent 8 years believing she had unexplained infertility, only to discover her husband had been secretly getting vasectomy consultations. The woman whose partner poked holes in condoms to trap her in a relationship. The woman who was told by doctors that her body was the problem, when her partner had been lying about his sperm count the entire time. Simone's voice was passionate now, the lawyer in her presenting a case to the jury of public opinion. Reproductive coercion is domestic abuse. Medical gaslighting is emotional abuse. And when partners deliberately lie about fertility status or sabotage birth control, that's not just cruel, it's a violation of bodily autonomy that should have legal consequences. She looked directly at the camera recording the event. If you're watching this and you recognize your own story in what I'm describing, I want you to know you're not alone. Your body isn't broken. You didn't fail. You were lied to, and that's not your fault. And there are people who want to help. The room erupted in applause. Simone finished her speech and introduced the final speaker, Tyler Morrison. Tyler Morrison looked nervous as he approached the podium, a tall man in his early 30s with the build of someone who spent his life in gyms but the uncertainty of someone out of his element. "I'm not a lawyer or a doctor," he began. "I'm a personal trainer. Public speaking isn't really my thing. But when Ms. Washington-Pierce's team reached out and asked if I'd be willing to share my story, I said yes. Because men need to hear this too." He took a breath. "A year ago, I found out the woman I'd been in a relationship with for 3 years was pregnant with my child. I was thrilled. Terrified, but thrilled. Then I found out she'd been telling another man, a wealthy man, that the baby was his. She'd been lying to both of us, using the pregnancy to manipulate him while keeping me on the side." Tyler's voice was steady despite the difficult subject matter. "I was angry. At her, obviously. But also at myself for not seeing it. For believing her when she said the relationship was complicated, but she was going to end things with him. For being part of a deception I didn't even know was happening." He looked out at the audience. "But here's what I learned. Reproductive coercion doesn't just hurt women. It hurts everyone involved. I have a son now, he's 6 months old, and he's the best thing that ever happened to me. But his mother lied to me about his paternity, tried to pass him off as another man's child, and created a situation where my son's early months were filled with legal battles instead of just being able to be a family. I'm sharing this because I want men to understand that lying about fertility, about paternity, about wanting children, that's not okay. It's not a white lie or a small deception. It's a fundamental violation of trust that has real consequences for everyone involved." Tyler finished his speech to respectful applause. It wasn't the thunderous response Simone had received, but it was meaningful. Men in the audience were nodding, understanding perhaps for the first time that these patterns of deception affected them too. After the speeches, after the donor presentations and the silent auction results, Simone found herself on the balcony, taking a breath of fresh air. Jonathan joined her, Mia having been escorted home by his sister. "You did good tonight," he said quietly. "Really good." "We did good," Simone corrected. "This is bigger than me now. It's a movement." They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at Atlanta's glittering skyline. "Can I ask you something?" Jonathan said after a while. "Always." "Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Not professionally. I know the foundation and the firm have big plans. But personally, what does happy look like for you?" Simone considered the question. A year ago, she would have said happy looked like a successful IVF cycle, a baby, a marriage that worked. But she'd learned that happiness built on lies wasn't happiness at all. "I think happy looks like truth," she said slowly. "Like relationships built on honesty. Like work that matters. Like maybe—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Like maybe what?" "Like maybe a family that I choose, rather than one defined by biology or societal expectations. Like building something real with people who see me for who I actually am, not who they want me to be." Jonathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That sounds like a good definition of happiness. What about you? What does happy look like for Professor Jonathan Wright?" "Honestly? Something very similar to what you just described. With maybe the addition of someone who challenges me, who makes me think differently, who isn't afraid to call me out when I'm wrong." He looked at her meaningfully. "Someone who's brilliant and brave and turns pain into purpose." Simone felt her heart skip. "Jonathan. Too fast?" he asked gently. "I can slow down. We can just be friends who get coffee and talk about legal theory." "No," Simone said, surprising herself. "Not too fast. Just unexpected. 6 months ago, I was still legally married. The idea of anything else felt impossible. And now it feels like maybe impossible isn't permanent. Maybe there's space for something new." Jonathan smiled, and it was warm and genuine and full of possibility. "I'd like to explore that space," he said. "If you would." "I would," Simone said. And standing on that balcony, looking out at the city she'd lived in for 15 years, Simone felt something shift. The anger that had fueled her for the past year, the righteous fury that had carried her through the gala confrontation and the divorce proceedings, was still there. But it was no longer the only thing she felt. There was also hope. Possibility. The sense that maybe the best parts of her life weren't behind her, but still ahead. She'd survived Marcus's betrayal. She'd built something meaningful from the wreckage. And now maybe she could build something else. Something gentle and honest and real. The foundation gala raised $4.2 million that night. More than enough to expand their services, hire additional staff, help hundreds more women. But for Simone, the real victory wasn't in the money or the success of the event. It was in the realization that she'd done more than survive her trauma. She'd transformed it. And in the process, she'd transformed herself from a woman who'd believed her worth was tied to her fertility into a woman who knew her worth had nothing to do with her body's ability to produce children. Her worth was in her mind, her skills, her refusal to accept lies as love. Her worth was in the women she'd helped, the legal framework she'd built, the foundation that would outlast any individual story. Her worth was in choosing truth over convenience, justice over silence, purpose over pain. And that was worth everything.